All
That's
right,
good
it's
value.
it's time to introduce our last guest of the evening, Maurice Hawkins from DC Tweet Team. How are you doing, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? Happy NFL draft. How's it going?
It's been going great for us. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I know that we've had Andy on before, but thank you for stepping in for him when he couldn't make it. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, no problem. Just a little side note. I was at a sports bar last night. Roger Browns, who's a longtime Detroit Lions Hall of Fame, defensive lineman. So just a quick shout out to Lions Nation. Dining at a restaurant of a former great Detroit Lion. So just thought I'd put that out there.
Fantastic. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, Maurice?
Well, I am a dirty American. You know, so I was, born in the state of New Jersey. Lived there to age 11. Moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, when my mom remarried. Lived there for about 3 years. Ironically, Las Vegas is where I became a Washington Redskins fan when they won their first Super Bowl against the Miami Dolphins in Super Bowl 17. Uh, Fast forward to 1985, we relocated to the DC metropolitan area where I graduated from high school, and I was able to watch the Redskins at the time win their second Super Bowl with Doug Williams in the DC metropolitan area. That was very exciting. Graduated high school, became a member of the United States Air Force, and while I was serving in the Air Force, the Redskins made their third Super Bowl appearance in Super Bowl 26, where they beat the uh, Buffalo Bills. And so I saw all three Super Bowl wins. I've been a fan since 1983 of Washington Redskins, now the Washington football team. And, I went to, I was in the Air Force, got out, went to college in Norfolk, Virginia, Norfolk State University. Um, Now I just work in sales and started the Redskins tweet team. I was a founding member of the Redskins tweet team in 2013. We became the DC tweet team once the team changed their name. Was with Andy when he started the DC tweet team podcast last year, and just really excited about supporting Washington football and all the progress the team has made. And now I'm here with you gentlemen, representing the blue and silver of the Detroit Lions tonight. So I'm just happy to be on the show tonight.
That's
I'm a
fantastic.
bit I'm a bit older than these guys, Maurice, and the first Super Bowl I ever watched that was on TV was when you beat the Broncos, and
Right.
you had that amazing triple threat receiving team of Art Monk, Gary Clark, and Ricky Sanders, like just unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable.
So funny story about that Super Bowl. So um, going into Super Bowl week, the Redskins were the underdogs to the Denver Broncos because everybody was enamored with John Elway. He was the golden child of the NFL at the time. And there was this really ridiculous notion that Denver's receiving core of the three amigos was superior to Washington's receiving core, which was known as the posse of Art Monk, Gary Clark, Ricky Sanders. So we had to show the Denver Broncos and all of America that we had the better receiving threat from the Broncos, and the rest is history. So
Yeah,
um,
I think it was 35 points in the second quarter. It was just absolute blowout.
I think that's still an NFL record, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
If you had to pick out one specific moment from your fandom, what would you say is your favorite moment from Washington history?
Oh my goodness, that's such a hard question. What is my favorite moment? I would say watching Super Bowl 22 and watching Washington win the Super Bowl. Being African American and Doug Williams being the first black quarterback to win a Super Bowl and become Super Bowl MVP was such a huge moment of pride. Uh, just to kind of put it in context for folks that lived in the DC area, it was almost the only thing I could compare it to would be Barack Obama winning the presidency in 2008. I mean, for NFL fans, for Black NFL fans, and being Black NFL fans who are fans of the Washington Redskins, I mean, Doug Williams was up there. It was such a proud moment. I was a junior in high school. I remember it vividly. I mean, there was so much pride. I mean, one pride for winning the Super Bowl, of course, but pride of being a part of a team that broke that color barrier for the first time. Now we don't think about it. Quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson doing it. It's not as big of a deal. But in 1988, it was a huge deal. So I would say that was my proudest moment as a Redskins fan.
There's just been a comment in the Twitch chat from our Patriots fan that we had on earlier saying that he absolutely loved that answer that you've just given. So yes, it's speaking to the guys that we have on.
Thank you.
In thinking about Black quarterbacks, you say it's not as big of a thing as it is now, as it was before, but I think it still is a thing, right? That there's not a huge amount of Black quarterbacks in the league, and it seems mad to me.
Well, I mean, here's the issue, right? When you look at the quarterback position, the quarterback, when you look at an NFL team, there's the owner, there's the coach, and there's the quarterback. And the quarterback is seen as a leadership figure. So I think that in some ways, and we're still battling that to a certain degree, there are some people who struggle with seeing an NFL team having a Black quarterback as the face of the franchise. I mean, some teams have done it very, very well. I would say that the Seattle Seahawks has done a great job with Russell Wilson over the years. I would say, I mean, up until this year, I thought Houston did a good job with Deshaun Watson, but, that has derailed, from what I can tell. So I think that, when we're thinking about merit-based evaluation of quarterbacks, if we look past the color and look at the talent, then there's a lot of Black quarterbacks that deserve the right to lead these franchises. But I think there's still people who want to have a certain type of person leading an NFL team in a leadership role. And I think there's still people who are trafficking and really worn out and blown out narratives about Black quarterbacks not being able to perform, which is simply not true. So I just think the reality is that there's some people that are more comfortable with a status quo quarterback leading the helm than maybe having an African-American quarterback.
But you need to have a look at some of the comments about Lamar Jackson and how he's a glorified running back, when he's got like a fantastic arm. That kind of says that some of these comments still haven't gone away, but we're really proud at Detroit, talking about leadership, that we've obviously got Brad Holmes as like leader as GM, when there's not a fair representation of Black GMs in the league.
Right. And Washington's GM, Martin Mayhew, he's a former Lions GM, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think the reality is that, I take it back to Dr. Martin Luther King. He said people should be judged by not by the color of the skin, but the content of their character. And if people are competent and they can perform at a high level, regardless of their race or sexual orientation, they should be allowed to perform, because again, at the end of the day, it's not about your beliefs, it's about performance. So that's the ideology that I live by, and I hope more people will do that moving forward in the future.
Before we get on to the draft, just how hyped were you about Robert Griffin III going back a few years? Because that was a big trade up, and that rookie year was something sensational.
Oh yeah, I mean the RG3, the RG3 draft in 2012 and subsequent season was probably the most exciting time to be a Redskins fan, well now Washington football team fan, since the glory days of the 80s. What RG3 did in that year was just nothing short of spectacular. It was, I remember it was the Thanksgiving game against the Cowboys, and just the offensive onslaught that he unleashed on Dallas. And at that moment, you just thought that this was going to be Washington football for the next decade, and how wrong we were with that decision. At the time, RG3 got hurt. He never recovered back to the great player that he was. And again, that was another situation, kind of going back to our conversation earlier. And I talked about this on another show, how we drafted RG3 in the 2012 draft, number 2 quarterback overall. And then in the same draft, we drafted Kirk Cousins, which automatically created that friction between the two players. And, it had camps divided in the Washington football team at the time. And I think that, to a certain degree, that serves as a disservice to RG3 because, when you're drafted the number 2 pick overall in the NFL draft, how often do teams draft a second quarterback in the same draft? It just doesn't happen. No. And I think that his confidence was shaken from the beginning. And I think that if he had full confidence in Washington at the time, had he not had Kirk Cousins looking over his shoulder, we could be talking about a very different quarterback life for RG3 in the NFL.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Just to talk about the draft that you've had so far, I think you're having one of the sneaky best drafts in the NFL so far. So at 19, you took Jamin Davis. You then took Samuel Cosmi at 51. I think it was then Benjamin St-Juste at 74. And then you managed to take Dyami Brown at 82. I mean, I'm thinking maybe Jamin Davis is slightly high, but maybe only a handful of picks. And every other pick is value all the way down. Fast players, smart players. How are you feeling so far on how it's gone?
Well, here's the thing so there was like huge debate within the Washington media community about, the football team jumping up in the draft, trying to get a quarterback, because that's what everybody wants. Everybody wants that draft moment. But, Coach Rivera was very clear throughout the entire offseason that the team was going to make decisions based off need, and the draft reflects that. Like everything that I wanted the Washington football team to do as it relates to the draft, drafting a linebacker, drafting offensive line, drafting a quarterback. They've done that so far. So it gives me a lot of excitement going into the 2021 season that we made decisions based off of need, not because we were trying to get the headlines from all of the different the NFL media ecosystem. Because I think a lot of teams make decisions like, well, let's draft this player and then have our decision validated by, the Mel Kipers of the world, the ESPNs of the world, NFL networks of the world.
Oh, and Mel Kiper, that's a swear word. Don't do
that. Well, you got to give him credit because he's carved a niche for himself, right? So good, bad, or indifferent. But I think that Coach Rivera, he's making decisions based off of building a team from the ground up. And this is something we really have not done as a franchise, probably going back to Joe Gibbs' first stint as coach of the Washington football team. So we're trying to build a solid program with players that reflect the culture and values of the coaching staff. And this draft is emblematic of that. Coach Rivera wants players that are an extension of himself on the field. It'll be smart guys, high character guys that are really about playing football, not necessarily trying to, worry about their endorsement deals and things of that nature. And I think as a fan base for Washington, that's what we care about: winning football. We don't care how we win football games. We just want to win football games. I think in the NFL, there's a lot of pomp and circumstance around putting up a lot of points, seeing the ball fly in the air, having that signature quarterback that's the face of the franchise. We don't care as a fan base. We just want to win football games. And Coach Rivera brings that blue-collar workman attitude as a coach, high character, high morals, and he wants players to reflect that, and we're seeing that with this draft.
Do you think that sometimes Washington has been guilty of making the wrong decisions because the owner, Daniel Snyder's like one of the more interfering, what you could call it interfering, we could call it hands-on. Do you think sometimes he has too much influence in terms of the decision making?
Well, it's kind of hard to say someone has too much influence when they own the team, right? So, yeah. So I think the challenge for Daniel Snyder is that he became the owner of Washington, a couple of years after Washington was one of the more dominant teams in the NFL. And I think the biggest infraction that Daniel Snyder engaged upon with the Washington fan base was that he did not preside over a team that was a perennial contender for playoff appearances and Super Bowls like we were in the past. So I think a lot of our fans held him accountable for that. And I think like it's like anything, when you make bad decisions, people take it out on you. When you make good decisions, people love you. Like if let's say for the next 5 years, if Washington is a perennial playoff contender, that which we're in the NFC Championship game, or we competing for a Super Bowl or win a Super Bowl, all of Dan Snyder's past transgressions are going to fall by the wayside. So, but I think that because he was the owner after Jack Kent Cooke, who presided over arguably the best period of time for Washington football, and he's had so many years of mediocrity and failure, the fan base has revolted against him. I have no doubt that Dan Snyder wants the best for Washington football. He just had to learn how to be a good owner. And I think since hiring Coach Rivera, hiring Jason Wright, our team president, hiring Julie Donaldson, the first woman to lead a media outfit for an NFL team, he's made some great decisions, and we're seeing the fruits of those decisions now. But I think that the past has been hard for Dan Snyder because of him being involved with the team on a hands-on level, and those decisions not panning out well for the team.
How do you see next year going with Fitzpatrick at the helm, as it seems he's going to be? Your defense is fierce and probably, apart from maybe the Browns, maybe the best in the league. And that offense lacked someone who could actually get the ball downfield, because your wide receiver core is much better than it was given credit for last year, given the limitations of your quarterback. Do you think that this is going to elevate you to be a contender this year?
I think that with Washington, like, we don't have the luxury of seeing ourselves as a contender. I think right now our focus has to be a consistent threat to win the NFC East on a regular basis. So, and the reason why I say that, because the NFC East has not had a repeat champion going back to like 2003. So we're talking almost 20 years since we've had a repeat champion in the NFC East. I think that's like 03, 04 with the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think that if Washington can win the NFC East again, or just make the playoffs again, 2 consecutive years in a row, that's something we haven't seen from Washington going back into like the early 90s. I think that was the last time when we had 2 consecutive years we made the playoffs. So I think that if we can make a playoff appearance, win a first round playoff game, I think we'll be ahead of schedule as a team. The NFC is crazy right now. There's a lot of flux there. I'll give an example. Drew Brees retiring, that's going to have a significant impact on the balance of power in the NFC, because New Orleans was always a perennial team. You could pencil them in pretty much every year to be in the playoffs. But now that Drew Brees has retired, it creates an opportunity for another NFC team to step into that space. Could Washington be that team? Could Chicago be that team now that they've drafted Justin Fields?
Language,
easy there.
I'm going to the NFC North podcast, so pardon me for my ignorance, right?
We don't appreciate that kind of language on the podcast.
Right. But I think there's an opportunity. I mean, I think there's an opportunity for Detroit with Jared Goff, right? I mean, he played in the Super Bowl, not too long ago. He's definitely have arm talent. I mean, he's a first-round pick. I was really surprised with the trade, to be quite honest with you. So, I mean, Detroit could be sneaky as far as maybe potentially step into that space that was vacated by the Saints. So we'll have to see what happens.
Maurice, I'm just wondering about, obviously, the new name changes coming up there. Is there anything that you're leaning towards in terms of what the new franchise name will be going forward?
I'm Team Warriors, 100%. I don't think we need to make this more complicated than it has to be. The two things, I've had the opportunity to talk directly to team officials about the team. I've been invited to a couple of sessions where they've done some focus groups. And the two things I've said, number one, is that I want the team name to reflect something that's aggressive, warrior-like, really gets me fired up. And I really want them to create a logo that really tugs at my heartstrings. That was the two things that the Washington Redskins name and logo did for me. I thought our logo was one of the best logos in the NFL, maybe second to the Detroit Lions logo with the fearsome lion. So I want to, definitely butter up you guys with that logo. But I think, that I feel very good that we're going to keep our color scheme of burgundy and gold. So that's inspiring. But I just want something tough, right? You look Washington Warriors. It's simple, but it gets to the point. I could roll with that every day. I've heard people talk about the Red Wolves. I could get behind that too, but not like I could get behind Washington Warriors.
I think we've taken up enough of your time, Maurice, but thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything you want to plug or anything like that before you go?
Yeah, I just if you have not listened to the DC Tweet Team, and I want to thank my partner in crime, Andy Burrows, who's a native of your homeland in Mario, England. Andy has really elevated himself as one of the premier Washington Football Team podcasts. Real quick, Andy started a podcast last May, so it'll be a year next month that we've had the podcast. And the Washington Football Team had their Burgundy and Gold Globe Awards, which are like the different fan recognitions. And because of Andy's efforts, he was able to lead our podcast to be recognized as one of the top 4 podcasts in the Washington football fan community. So it was our podcast and 3 other podcasts that were recognized as a top fan podcast by the Washington Football Team. And I think that speaks volumes to his talent, his leadership, his passion behind being a robust podcaster, bringing Washington Football Team content to the British Isles and beyond. And I'm just proud to be a partner with Andy and the great work that he's doing. And I think Andy has done an extraordinary job of illustrating the passion that folks in England have about NFL football. And I'm just happy to work with him.
He's absolutely fantastic. Following him on Twitter is entertaining. If nothing else, he's a fantastic guy, and I really enjoy talking to him. But you are too, spoken so eloquently, and we really appreciate your time. I think there's a joint effort. As much as Andy is great, you clearly, from your background, and you're able to just. I find it amazing your knowledge recall of just this team, these players, and I struggle with it, even though I've been a fan pretty much for the last 10 years. Even trying to remember what happened yesterday is a struggle. So. It's really, really impressive. Thank you so much for coming on and stepping in for Andy. It's been great to talk to you.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much. I'm humbled to be on your show. Keep up the good work. And if you all ever want me on your show again, please reach out. I'd be more happy to be on.
Nice to meet you, Maurice.
Thank you, Maurice.
Thank you, Maurice.
All right.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.